Melukim planti or stories headlines with Papua New Guinea make him long. Side HIV AIDS. So not of Papua New Guinea is probably the highest in the South Pacific region or the Asia Pacific in terms of HIV rate na or this blah. So I think plenty comments na plenty data have come out of media only sharing business. But me like sharing some like insights. I think long 2020 come the 21 me work one time TB na HIV program, and that was the only donor that was funding all the work around TB and HIV at that time. And why the donor was funding TB and HIV is because they both are co-infection. So if you have TB and you go to the hospital for check, obviously they will have to check for the HIV status as well because of that co-infection. TB and HIV go together. And so at that time, there were the donor was funding the HIV programs in 8 high-burden provinces in the country, and every month we have to travel out to these 8 high-burden provinces, which are we have the NCD, Morobe, Medang, Eastern Highlands, Western Highlands, Anga province, Jiwarka, Simbu, and those were the highlands provinces, and plus the coastal provinces as well. And most of the time, these travels were basically public, were forums held by what they called a key population. Now, you may ask, so what is key population? So in the TB HIV program at that time, where it was funded by that particular donor, it was called key population because these are the key people who are at a higher risk of contracting HIV and spreading HIV to their clients and to the public, general public. So the key population comprises of the people already living with HIV, sex workers or within the network, and we have high risk men, or men, MSM, men having sex with men, and all these that come under the category of a key population. And then one of the interesting things that came out from the community-led monitoring that was done within this project was that there was an increasing number of the key population, and those as young students in the teenage, in the high schools, and some goes as far as primary schools who are now becoming part of the key population, either as sex workers or as gays or as transgender or high risk, involved in high risk, that categorize them into the key population category. And so the data at that time was really frightening already. Now I was doing the communication and the advocacy and the community mobilization aspect of the donor funded project, and at times I get so much of a goosebump to think about how risky and how that looks for us, like it's a time bomb that is already in thrown at our court, and we are just playing around with it. And then like in those provinces, when I traveled with them, I had to really sensitize myself to be able to not judge them as a key population, but to work with them to see the positive aspect of the referral pathways that they can get. So my role basically was to advocate on behalf of their human rights. Sort of, well, that can, like I could say, like, well, if he or she is a HIV positive, we can judge them as it is their mistake, or it is, well, it's their problem, or they're the cause of being contracting HIV and being positive. And I recall one of that time I was able to meet with the country manager for Susumama in Mount Hagen, and the data she was sharing was really goosebump when there has been an increased number of parent to child transmission, and that was something that the government hasn't really pumped funding into. And so if you look at the high risk, the key population, well, these are probably, they're teenage to adults, and they have develop the full reasoning to know what is right and what is wrong. But just imagine the innocent children who are contracting HIV because of parent to child transmission, because the parent has the virus, has been infected, they pass it on to the child during birth, and etc. And I recall, accepting the fact that the key population exists within our society, and we as the general population interact with them. So they call those of us who are not within the definitions of key population. We are not sex workers, we are not gays, we are not transgender, we are not high risk men. Then we are categorized as the general population. And what challenges me a lot was that I am a general population working with a key population to help them understand what the referral pathways are and what services are available. In fact, there was an act, the Hemp Act, that was there, but it's something that hasn't been really implemented, hasn't been taken seriously. That is why, like, if you accuse someone, you call them HIV person, they can sue you because of that act, the Hemp Act. You know, these key populations are they're organized and they have their organizations. And I recall one of the exercises that we did in the community-led monitoring was to map out, for example, in Port Moresby, within the context of the community monitoring program, they were able to map out the hotspots within the city. Now, what are the hotspots? The hotspots are the spots where these activities take place, where sex workers are being picked up or they're doing their business. It could be some random bus stops around the city where women are being picked up, men are being picked up. Now I have to make it straight. It's not just women, it's men as well that are being picked up by those who have money to spend. And there are different category of when it comes to the category of the sex workers. They're different. Those that you see on the streets and you mock them around, they're those who are based in hotels, and there are those who even fly into the mine sites, to logging sites, or to where there's the economic activities and there is demand for what they do. And it's really a risk because you know when the economy as it is in this stage where Kina is devaluating, the prices of goods are going up, you are expecting more young key population to come up and do the easy way out of this. And there has been cases where when we were attending all these forums across the 8 high-burden provinces, the young key population coming up and say, see, I was negotiating with a client like this, and because they had that money, they promised, like, well, my rate is 500 kina, and they're here with a bundle of 1,000 kina. And what could I do? Should I just allow them to do what they wanted to do, any act that they want to do because they have the money? Or do I have to stick to my safety and think of it seriously? You will notice that there is no longer that public awareness about HIV where people stand and use loud aliens and shout. Why? Because when that particular donor came into the country, the focus was on the key population. So the key population now, they were able to work within their network of clients and they were able to get them for testing, for referral, firstly for the rich. So rich is they're able to negotiate with their client, be able to persuade them with the key messages on the use of condoms, on sexual health and the dangers of unprotected sex and stuff. And then if they see that they're within the high risk, they've been exposed, then there comes the referral where they're taken by the client, the customer, to a clinic, nearest clinic, to be tested, and when they're positive, they go on ART treatment. And then if they along the way they got lost from the treatment regime, then they're called lost to follow, and then they have to look for them around again to bring them back on the treatment regime. And when that goes on within that space of looking for the guy or that woman or that lady, the chances are that other people have been infected in the process. And it's interesting because I follow them. Like I went as far as Jiwakar and I follow a clinician into. There was a lodge close to the Jiwakar Rugby Oval somewhere there, and I was carrying my camera with me. And when they saw the camera, everyone like dished. They went out and couldn't show up. And so the clinician told me, "Oh, son, you have to bring your camera back." I think they saw the camera and they wouldn't come out. Now, this is a lodge there in somewhere in Jiwaka, and imagine that there are hotels and there are lodges in Port Moresby per se that are operating now. When just after the COVID, and so they've made a lot of loss, and they're operating more as where almost the trades are taking place, where the buying of sex and the transaction is taking place. And so the activity is happening within the shadows of the city, of the towns, and it's happening. And so you won't see people doing public awareness because it's now the approach is more targeted. It's a client to the customer approach where they're reaching out to their customers who are buying for the service they're giving. And so this is where the HIV program is, and it's really frightening when there are some provinces that we went and the clinician did some testing, and the reaction was like within a night or a day when they did a pricking, the reaction was like if there was 30, you could have a bigger number, more than a 10 that could show some reaction. And it's quite a different trend from the past now, where 1 out of 10 or so you could have 1 out of 10. But now you are seeing 30 and you're getting as high as above 10. And then just remember that is not the whole population being tested, and how many are being infected and are sharing the infection around. And it's a high risk for us as Papua New Guineans. So that is some part of what I'm sharing, and I could say also that the network extends to as far as the Asia. And I personally, I was doing some monitoring and evaluation. So I was asked to do a video and then I found out that there was a network some way outside of the country that was really funding some sort of rehabilitation for the old sex workers within the country. So, folks, you have seen the data, and what I'm sharing is the reality of what's happening at the background. We've heard the meetings with National AIDS Council. At that time, I recalled there's so much data that I was looking at, but the donor doesn't have in its communication and donor branding staff that we could share that. So the onus is on the health department to share the data, and National AIDS Council to share the data that is collected from the community-led monitoring program with UNAIDS and other agencies. But I think the great mistake that was made was that the data has to be shared, and what happens in the shadows of the background that puts out the data has to be told as well. So if I'm telling this, I think this will be the first that I'm sharing the insights into what happens that you're not seeing public AIDS awareness out there. That is what's happening. It's more of a client to customer approach now that's being happening in the country.